Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gabe Albornoz. I'm one of the 4 at-large members of the Montgomery County Council. I chair our county's Health and Human Services Committee, and I am here joined by my colleagues who I will introduce shortly, as well as important community activists and leaders, as well as community and government leaders, to acknowledge that June is the beginning of Gun Violence Awareness Month. And June 2nd kicks off the start of Wear Orange Weekend, honoring the lives cut short every day by gun violence. Orange became the defining color of gun violence prevention after Hadia Pendleton, a Chicago young woman only 15 years old, just a few days after performing at President Obama's 2012 inauguration, was senselessly gunned down. She, unfortunately, like thousands of Americans, are gunned down every day and every week in this country. It is clear that states with stronger gun laws have significantly lower rates of gun violence. That is conclusive. And here in Maryland, we have been leaders for generations now on ensuring that we have responsible gun legislation. But because of actions of our Supreme Court last year, and because of political winds that seem to be shifting in the wrong direction, we can no longer say with certainty that even in jurisdictions as Montgomery County, that we are as safe as we possibly can be. Now, 2 years ago, the county led, and we were able to introduce legislation that I was happy to lead, along with support of my entire colleagues, to be the first county in the state of Maryland to eliminate ghost guns. Our state delegation and legislature followed shortly thereafter to eliminate them at the state level. And after actions taken by the Supreme Court last year, we were once again the first county to act and define what we meant by public assembly. But that's not enough. Legislation alone is not going to solve this problem. We all have to work collectively to change hearts and minds. This awful cocktail of misinformation and fear is leading to too many of our residents wanting to purchase firearms thinking that it will help keep them and their families safe, when we know, as a matter of fact, that that is not true. We know that that will make it significantly more likely for somebody in their home to take their own life. We know that it will make it significantly more likely that if that firearm were to be stolen, that it would be utilized in a crime, and yet another victim would succumb to what somebody feels is something that is going to keep them safe when in fact it does not. So while we have control here at the local level, we have to press our federal partners more so than we have before. We have to take advantage of the fact that we here in Montgomery County reside and are neighbors of our federal partners in Washington, D.C., and we have to do more here, locally. And so this fall, I will be leading an effort to work with colleagues to go to D.C. and lobby not so much our Maryland delegation, which really understands and gets it, but those other states that don't. A lot of work needs to be done. And I'll close with this before introducing my colleagues. This morning, my 7-year-old daughter had a ceremony to recognize the end of her kindergarten class year. It was an incredibly special moment. But I'll be honest, in the back of my mind and in my subconscious, I was thinking about the students of Uvalde, Texas. Just a year ago today, those lives that were shattered. And if I'm also being honest, I also looked around my church to see where the best exits would be in the event that something were going to happen. We shouldn't have to live like this, and we don't have to. So with that, I want to introduce my colleagues to make some comments. I will start with Councilmember Fani-González, whose own district was once again torn apart by gun violence just a few days ago. Councilmember Fani-González.
I feel that every time I have events like this, I cannot speak just like an elected official, but I have to speak as a mom, and that's not why I'm wearing this shirt. Guns really need to be off our streets. No matter in which zip code you live, they need to be off our streets. And I'm not only saying this as a mom, but also as a military wife. My husband is a former Marine, and he will be the first person who will tell you Guns do not belong in streets. We're killing each other, and it shouldn't be that way. So it's mostly a cultural change that we need to do in our nation, to understand that having a gun doesn't make you macho or doesn't make you more powerful. It doesn't work that way. It's about civility, it's about caring, it's about loving each other and protecting each other. So changing that mindset, it will take a while. Yes, we need to push for laws, and I'm all about it, but also understanding that as a culture, we need to evolve to understand that caring for each other should be our main thing. So thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much to Council Member Gabe Albornoz for his leadership in moving this forward, not just today, but throughout the years. So thanks.
Thank you all. I first really want to express my gratitude and appreciation to Councilmember Gabe Albornoz for your leadership on this issue, as Councilmember Fani-González said, as well as to all of my other colleagues, both at the local and state level, who have really made Montgomery County, Maryland, one of the safest places that we can be in this country when it comes to gun violence. And as a mom myself, that's also something that I feel very, very deeply. But there is still work to be done here at the federal, at the state, and at the local level. So I am committed to keeping this top of mind and working proactively to make those changes along with our local, state, and federal colleagues, including right here where we can be doing things like ensuring that families in MCPS schools are all getting information about safe gun storage. There is still low-hanging fruit to be had here in Montgomery County. So thank you so much for gathering here today. And I cannot forget to thank really the leaders in all of this, our community activists and advocates who are here with us today. March for Our Lives, Moms Demand Action, Everytown, all of these advocates who have continued to move the work and the conversation forward. We would not be here doing this work without all of you. Thank you.
Much like my other colleagues up here, much of what I say and much of what I do in my public service comes from my role as a parent and my passion as a parent. And one of the things I was actually talking about earlier today at another event was the surprise and horror I have that no matter how frequently these incidents are happening, how hard it is for people to accept that they have to play their part, even when it hasn't happened yet in their own backyard. And in 2018, when the tragedy at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School happened in Parkland, Maryland, the state of Maryland worked hard to get school safety legislation passed, but yet it still wasn't getting the attention it needed during that legislative session until we had our own tragedy at Great Mills High School in St. Mary's County. We need to do better. I am very grateful for the tireless advocacy of Moms Demand Action, and I am incredibly thankful that Jalen's Law finally passed this year after tireless hours and sessions trying to move that bill forward to pass common sense gun safety laws and public health awareness. This is a public health crisis. And I want to thank Moms Demand Action for your support still and in my prior life at the state with helping out with our Active Assailant Interdisciplinary Work Group Symposium, making sure you spread information on how to go out and work with folks on learning how to prevent gun violence and safely store firearms. So thank you, and I look forward to sharing lots of future opportunities with my colleagues to advocate to help move us forward, because it's not just about Montgomery County, it's about everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Albornoz. I want to start by thanking my colleague and chair of the Health and Human Services Committee for convening this event. I'd also like to thank Councilmember Natalie Fani-González, chair of the Economic Development Committee, for bringing us here today to recognize National Gun Violence Awareness Day. I would like to thank Moms Demand Action, the Department of Health and Human Services, the Montgomery County Police Department, and all other stakeholders safeguarding our communities and keeping guns off of our streets. We are also fortunate to have Governor Westmore and so many state and local legislators who are fully on board with taking action to prevent gun violence. Today, I want to urge everyone listening to please get involved. Everyone in our community is affected when gun violence occurs, so everyone must play a role when gun violence needs fierce advocates to fight its proliferation in our communities. As a lawmaker, I assure you this work does not happen in silos. Our communities, our advocates, and organizations all have a role to play. Again, I want to thank groups like Moms Demand Action. As a mother joining my fellow colleagues, this is so important that we keep our schools, our communities, and the places where we congregate safe. We need to mobilize our communities to ensure sweeping gun legislation becomes a reality, not just in our county and state, but across the nation. Whether joining your local Moms Demand chapter, getting involved with a community organization, speaking up at a local community event, testifying in Annapolis or on Capitol Hill or right here in Montgomery County, we need you to step up and ensure that your loved ones are safe. Organizing is where it starts, but that is not where it ends. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Joanna Pearl, and I'm the co-lead for the Montgomery County local group of Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. I'm a mom to a 5-year-old, and I live in Kensington. I want to thank the County Council, Council members Albornoz and Fani-González and the entire council, and really everyone standing behind me, but the council for issuing the proclamation we're going to hear about and for hosting this event. We are so grateful for your support on this critically important issue for our community. Thank you for your partnership in working to keep our families and children safe from preventable and senseless gun violence. And thank you for including us today. Today, on National Gun Violence Awareness Day, and during Wear Orange weekend, which extends through Sunday, we wear orange to demand a future free from gun violence. Orange symbolizes the value of each person's life, and we wear it to honor those killed, wounded, and impacted by gun violence, and to call for an end to this crisis. 2022 was another deadly year for America's gun violence epidemic. And in the first half of 2023, the impacts of this public health crisis have continued to devastate communities and families across the country, including right here in Montgomery County. But as incidents of gun violence have grown, so too has the movement to stop them. We continue to educate, raise awareness, organize, advocate, and rally for safer communities. We invite everyone to join us in Wear Orange this year by attending events throughout this weekend, which you can find at wearorange.org. Together, we will remember the millions of lives taken or impacted by gun violence and demand action in their honor. Together, we can build a future free from gun violence. Thank you again to the County Council for all of your work and to all of you for being here today.
I want to first of all thank Councilmember Albornoz and Councilmember González, as well as the entire County Council for their leadership on this. Mom Demands Action. We got your back 100%. We will continue to partner together to get that message across. Councilmember Albornoz mentioned something that was really important, and that is that Montgomery County is, in essence, a very safe place to live. Being a resident here in Montgomery County for the past 18 years of my life, I totally agree with that, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done as well. We are very fortunate that both our county executive and our county council has invested in a lot of programs to support young people, in particular, most likely involved in gun violence or impacted by gun violence. But there needs to be more work. We need our state delegates to step up. We need also our federal partners to step up. President Biden this past year started a very solid effort called the 16 City Initiative to address gun violence. And we hope that part of that discussion in D.C. leads to Montgomery County getting some of those resources as well, so we can continue to strengthen and expand from what we have. On a practical note, as a parent, but it was also someone who personally lived a lifestyle where I carried a gun all the time. This message goes out to those young people, in particular those young people that possess weapons, those people that live by the gun. Reinforcing what Councilmember Albornoz said, having and possessing a gun and carrying a gun makes you more likely to die by a gun. I am living testimony of it. I'm blessed to be here in this life. having been shot 3 times, and in every instance, I had a gun on my possession illegally, right? And so I hope that the young people listen loud and clear to what I just said, because the likelihood of dying by a gun increases so much by actually having a gun on you. It is not going to make you safer. There are people and there are programs in this county that are really dedicated to helping to make you feel safer. Work with us. For those of you who've been directly impacted by gun violence, especially recently in the Germantown area, let the police do what they have to do. Let them arrest the individuals who are responsible for the acts of gun violence. And so that is a plea that I make to each and every one of you, and thank you very much.
May I say, it's a great honor for me to be here, joining a partnership. I think the only way you can actually intelligently deal with any issue in the community, particularly one which involves guns and violence, is through partnerships. And I want to thank everybody who was here, and Gabe in particular, for bringing us together here today. I want to thank him and the county council. Last year, we did 2 intelligent things, being the leader on banning the ghost guns, and then restricting the areas in which you could carry handguns. That was mimicked also by the legislature, and also in this year, it's quite interesting to me, whether it's here locally or down in Annapolis, the leaders that are driving policies that make us safer are legislators from Montgomery County. It's legislators from Montgomery County, whether it's the senators or the delegates that are doing it. So we want to thank them. We'd like to be, this is an area where we want to be a leader. Am I concerned? Look, we are a safe community. We're a great community, but we're not the same community we want to be. That's just a reality, because we've tolerated too many guns in our community. The number of guns went up last year to historic levels. We are continuing in that area, in that direction. Our crimes being committed by young offenders. I think that's what Luis Cardona is really talking about. Violence that's happening, most recently, I guess, in Wheaton, well, there was also the shooting that occurred in the Wheaton substation, and the victim in that case is a 16-year-old, was an 18-year-old boy shot by a 16-year-old boy with a gun that didn't know each other at the top of an escalator. By the time they got to the bottom, somebody was dead. We've got to come together. We've got to do better, and we've got to be consistent in the laws. I'm concerned that, we're restricting the searches that we can do of cars now. 75% of all the guns taken off the streets of Montgomery County, taken out of cars, come when we smell the odor of marijuana. We're not allowed to do that anymore. Between Prince George's and Montgomery County, that will leave about 1,000 guns on the street if you look at last year's numbers. That is not a good idea in terms of reducing the number of guns. Am I scared about guns increasing presence on the street? 84,000, as of yesterday, 84,000 Marylanders have asked for wear-carry permits that didn't have them before. That's a lot more guns on the street. We've got to come together, and as a community, we must do better. Thank you very much.
177. That's the number year to date of how many firearms-related deaths we've experienced in the state of Maryland. 522. That's the number of firearms-related injuries that did not result in death we've experienced in the state of Maryland. And each one of those numbers reflects a person, reflects a family. And all too often, Montgomery County has unfortunately been adding to those numbers. So as a law enforcement leader here in the county, I fully recognize that our officers and our deputy sheriffs are some of the first frontline folks that are really seeing the tragedies that we're experiencing due to these firearms. So it's a privilege to stand here today with these leaders and these community members to stand up for firearms-related violence. I appreciate everything that's being done, and I appreciate the efforts of our state's attorney and my fellow law enforcement leaders.
We will now read the proclamation. So whereas June is National Gun Violence Awareness Month, and today, June 2nd, is the start of Wear Orange Weekend, which honors the 120 lives that are cut short every day in our nation due to gun violence, including the life of Hadia Pendleton, a Chicago 15-year-old slain days after performing at President Barack Obama's 2012 inauguration, and whose death prompted the adoption of orange as the defining color of the gun violence prevention movement. And
whereas gun violence is the leading cause of death among children and teens in the United States, and an unacceptable distinction among peer nations, with lives lost, families shatter, and communities change forever. Americans are 26 times more likely to be killed by a gang homicide than in other high-income countries. And
whereas gun violence is not a mental health issue, with less than 5% of violent behavior being attributable to any type of mental health disorder, and should not be used as a distraction from the real issues of firearms accessibility and the public health response to the risk of gun-related suicides. And
whereas Montgomery County has experienced lower levels of gun-related crime compared to neighboring jurisdictions and enacted a prohibition on the possession of ghost guns by minors, as well as restricted firearms within 100 yards of places of public assembly. Nonetheless, ghost guns made up 15% of more than 1,200 guns recovered by the Montgomery County Police Department in 2022. And in this year alone, 451 firearms have been recovered, of which 45 were ghost guns. And
whereas the ability of Montgomery County to reduce gun violence is impacted by the strength of neighboring state laws and federal laws. Gun violence is a federal, state, and local issue requiring both governmental and non-governmental, nonpartisan entities, such as Moms Demand Action and Everytown for Gun Safety, working at all levels to implement policies and programs to reduce gun violence.
Now therefore it be resolved that the County Council of Montgomery County, Maryland hereby recognizes June 2023 as National Gun Violence Awareness Month and calls upon residents to honor those whose lives were cut short and the countless survivors who are injured by shootings every day. Wear orange this weekend in memory of the countless lives lost to gun violence and with the hope and steadfast resolve that we will prevail through continued advocacy at the local, state, and federal level to end gun violence in our country. Presented on the second day of June in the year 2023, signed by myself on behalf of all of my colleagues. Thank you all very much.